everyone. Thank you for checking out Mold Talks. I have a very special guest, Courtney. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate in Mold Talks. I want to share your story with others because I strongly believe that it can help people who may be experiencing similar difficulties. So without further ado, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Courtney Otten. I struggled with mold for a couple years, and I'm grateful to be well now. It ended up leading me down the road of becoming a health practitioner myself because I struggled for so long, and I know how lonely it gets and how hard it is. So it's really given me the tools, all the research I did on my own to become an integrative health practitioner. So I help people get to the root cause of their health issues, which oftentimes can be mold and I'm mostly do a lot of gut health work.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everything that you now do. And this is awesome that you were able to turn this struggle into somewhat of a passion, not only to help yourself get out of it, but to help others. So what definitely brings me into my first question is when was it that you first noticed you weren't feeling well?
Yeah, so it was like probably around 4 years ago. I had graduated college and I had a lot of digestive issues, candida. And I did multiple candida cleanses and it kept coming back and I didn't understand and it just kept coming back. And that, led me down the path of mold eventually.
Yeah, and I've heard Candida and mold go very well hand in hand.
Mhm.
Actually, why don't you do this since you're in this role now? Why don't you explain to everyone what Candida is?
So, candida is a yeast overgrowth. And as we know, mold is a fungus. So, they are both fungi. So, that's where they go very well hand in hand. Candida is often, most people have it in the gut. So, it usually leads to gut dysbiosis and a lot of other gut issues, bloating, constipation, loose stool, all of that. And so, a lot of people with candida, like I did, if you're going through candida cleanses all the time and it keeps coming back, there's a deeper issue. You don't need to just kill the candida. So for me, it happened to be mold.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you for that. And yeah, I've definitely seen the Candida cleanse being part of the program for when someone is looking to intentionally, rid themselves of the toxins that are going on inside their body, get their gut microbiome back in proper order, all that good stuff. So yes, thank you for that.
So after I realized it was like all these gut things and things weren't getting any better, I was living in an old house and my ex-boyfriend would say every time he woke up he was getting phlegmy and I was too, but I thought nothing of it. So and then a leak sprung naturally, always a leak somewhere. So we realized that it was more than likely mold. Of course, asked the landlords to look at it and they were like, well, there's nothing on the inside. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, sure, there's nothing on the inside. That means that the water that's been dripping through definitely didn't create any issue in the walls and the roof.
Yeah, yeah, some negligence there. And what year was this?
So for it was 2017.
2017. Okay. And so, how did you first figure out that it was mold? Was it at that moment? Was it some years later?
So that was where the seed was sort of planted, but I didn't think as much of it until I worked with a really well-known health practitioner and she put me on yet another gut cleanse, yet another candida protocol. And I was like, okay, she knows what she's doing. She's dealt with literally thousands of people. And so as soon as we finished that, I broke out in a huge, like full body rash. It was ridiculous. And it was pretty much the epitome of what you would consider a mold rash. Like if you look mold rashes up, that's exactly what it was. So I was fortunate enough that that literally pointed me in the direction of nothing else but mold.
Well,
Yeah. And so it started with that, and then I realized that that obviously had just done the trickle down effect because everyone says like skin issues or gut issues, but I had just done one of the most intensive gut protocols from someone who is literally a gut expert, and I was like, well,
right.
it can't be, it's got to
Can't
be
be that.
something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you started to connect the dots and say this has to be mold. What did you do about it at that point? Well, first off, were you renting? Was it your own house? What was that like? What were the living conditions like, and how did you fix that?
I was renting a really old 1-bedroom apartment. I was on the 3rd floor and yet another leak sprung in the bedroom and it was just dripping in. They couldn't, because this was when COVID happened. So I was
Mm.
honestly, I say the quarantine saved my life. I was fortunate enough because, like I said, a full body rash, I couldn't go to work. I could barely put clothing on because it was so uncomfortable. So I got lucky. I was renting and I had a friend whose roommate had just moved out, and he said that it was totally fine if I moved in because his roommate, I mean, not his roommate, his landlord reduced his rent. So he just let me move in with him. And I just abandoned my old apartment. I still had to pay all the rent, but he let me move in with him rent free, thankfully.
Well, that worked out.
I
So you
got
still had
lucky.
to pay all the rent, even though this place is so toxic you can't even live there.
Yeah.
And did you ever try to reach out to him to make the necessary repairs?
I did. I asked them to look into it and they just said they repaired the roof and they weren't going to break the roof open again. And they were like, it's fine. And like most negligent landlords,
Mm.
I just didn't want to spend the money on a test since I knew it was mold. I think so. I never ran
Yeah,
a test on my apartment, but just based on all the leaks, the musty smell, and they just weren't
yeah,
willing to do anything about it. So I didn't want to spend the couple $100 when I was like, I can spend that money to just get well.
yeah. No, that makes sense. Do you think that if you would have showed the landlord that there was indeed mold there and it was the cause of your health concerns, do you think that they would have taken that serious and maybe went with that in hindsight, or do you think that, because obviously nobody knows the landlord quite as well as you do, or do you think that even if you sent them a test, they would just kind of poo-poo it off and say it's not a big deal?
I think that that landlord may have actually listened to me. I had a prior one before that I had mold issues with that I was kind of scarred by because everything I told them and showed them, they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's nothing. So I
Yeah.
kind of just thought everyone was going to be like that. But I totally think that they probably would have taken it seriously. But at the same time, it was a house from the 1920s. Like,
Yeah.
I think had they still remediated, there would have been a lot of other things
Yeah,
needed
there,
to
there
be
could have been
done.
other things you didn't know about. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the only reason I'm asking, just because if someone's in your situation, I want them to think that sometimes testing may
Mhm.
make a lot of sense to give it to the landlord and say, look, these are the issues, especially if you like the place, you want to stay there. I want people to know there are options, and not every landlord is terrible. And hopefully, if you have a good one and you get the testing and you show it to them, they know you're not just, being a pest. You actually, have legitimate concerns. And I think that's important to kind of gloss over.
I totally
Um,
agree. I like I said, I just had one negative one in the past and my
yeah,
lease was up in
yeah,
2 months. So I was like, 2 months of rent, no biggie. I was in a situation where I was like, I can just write it off and move forward.
yeah, yeah. No, no, and obviously the timing couldn't have worked out better with your friend being able to offer a place to stay. So that's cool. So, a lot of people talk about how they go from doctor to doctor, sometimes doctor to doctor, doctor to doctor, add some more doctors in the mix. And they finally find someone who's like, hey, it's probably mold. And, curious to see how the journey was for you. How many doctors did it take before, and sometimes maybe it wasn't a doctor that told you, you figured it out, but what was that journey like? How many doctors, and did it finally take before there was some realization that mold was probably the factor here?
So super interesting for me. I didn't go to any like traditional MDs. I was seeing like mostly holistic practitioners because with gut issues, I know MDs don't always really know what's going on, and that's what started
Sure.
mine. But it took even multiple of them, which I thought was so interesting because you would think they would think mold is a big deal. And it took probably like 3 practitioners over, and that was on and off because I couldn't always find someone I resonated with over the course of like it was like 2 to 3 years. I had seen so many practitioners and everyone just kept telling me, fix your gut, fix your gut. And I was like, okay. And, wasn't a gut thing anymore. It ended up being a mold thing. And then I even sought out, because mine was a skin issue, I sought out a dermatologist and they just give you something topical and an antibiotic. And even though that's not exactly my realm, I'm way more holistic than that. I just needed to make it stop at that point. I needed to be able to live my life, to leave my house. And then once it came back, I was like, enough's enough. This is mold.
Yeah.
And and then I started living there during quarantine and it got worse. and worse and worse. And it was hard when no one could give you any answers. It gets really hard. And I know how hard it can be for people when you keep seeing everyone and they're all saying the same things. And you're like, but that's not working. But I've tried that. So
Yeah, that's the, the biggest heartbreak of it all is like searching for answers and nobody has any, and you're going doctor to doctor trying to figure out what's going on with you, all while you're not feeling well, right? And you can't help but not have this sense of hopelessness, right? Because you're just like, I'm never going to figure this out. I'm always going to feel this way. And it's interesting. I've seen people post a lot about this online that, mold doesn't define you. And it's so true, because really it doesn't. Actually, what defines you is long after the fact, when you're back to normal, and the things when you bounce back and what you do from that point on. This is a momentary part of time where you were dealing with health effects. You were struggling to figure out what it was, but then once you figured it out, it was like boom. I mean, honestly, it's probably changed your entire life, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I get this sense that you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today if you didn't go through that struggle. And so it's encouraging to know that there is another side to this, and you will get to that, through that darkness into that light and get to the other side. So kind of thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable here. What were some of your symptoms?
for me, it was waking up with all of that mucus in your throat. That was one of the things that like really keyed into mold. I had really bad GI issues. Like I said, Candida that could not be healed regardless of all the cleanses and everything. And it was just like an I even got it tested by the dermatologist. They just called it eczematous dermatitis, which is just saying an eczema rash. So everywhere, full body, ever but my face. I was lucky. I don't know why. It covered like 30% of my body at one point. And like I said, I was so lucky that quarantine happened because I couldn't leave my house. I could barely put clothing on without it being uncomfortable. It was probably the main symptom and probably one of the most emotionally trying symptoms to look in the mirror and see that every single day.
Yeah, I mean, it's never good to look in the mirror and not be happy with what you see. It's very disparaging to on a personal level to go through that. I mean, similar things happen with weight, and mold can happen. Mold can cause weight issues as well, both weight gain and weight loss, which makes it even more difficult to pinpoint because it's not just one or the other. And obviously looking in the mirror and seeing these things and not being happy with the way you look. I mean, the psychological toll that takes on somebody, plus not feeling well, waking up and just feeling like crap every single day. I mean, it does take a really big turn on somebody. And, what can be even more difficult is not having a support system around you going through all of that, which is what, unfortunately, what I hear of a lot when I speak to clients, like their boyfriend or their husband isn't really understanding what they're going through, or vice versa. Their girlfriend or their wife isn't understanding what they're going through. It's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes when you literally aren't experiencing anything at all of what they're experiencing it. And it can make it very difficult because this can happen in a family of four. It could be one or two out of the four that are experiencing symptoms and no one else is. And so it's hard, on either side, right? Because on one side, you always want to support the people you love, but if you don't understand what they're going through, how can you be supportive? And then, to be sick and go through all these psychological components as well, to try to explain what you're going through in a way where, a loved one can understand it can be difficult in and of itself. So it really puts a big strain on the familial relationship. So I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but many clients do. And it's it can be very difficult.
Yeah, totally. And especially things like fatigue, because you don't know, like you can't really explain fatigue to someone. You just feel awful all the time. Like I was fortunate that it was on my skin. So literally no one could deny it. No one could deny that I was covered in this ridiculous
Right.
rash. Like my parents looked at me and they were like, oh my God, we didn't know how bad you were feeling until we saw this. And they felt
Yeah.
really bad because they had no idea until, like I said, everywhere. There's no
Yeah.
denying it at that point. But the fatigue is probably one of the
Yeah.
biggest things, like you said, that it's hard to understand because
Yeah.
it'll probably even get some people questioning in their heads, like, is this all in my head? Do I actually feel like this? Or do I just think that I
Yeah.
feel like this? And it's just a never ending
Totally.
cycle.
Yeah, totally. And obviously with chronic fatigue syndrome, it's really debilitating to the point where, I mean, obviously, just like anything else, some days are better than others. But those really bad days where you literally don't even get out of bed, that's not laziness. You literally don't have the energy to get out of bed. And so if someone else has never been through that, it's hard to really ever communicate that to somebody. um Someone once explained it to me like as in it's the worst hangover you could ever imagine. Just getting out of bed is not even an option. It's not even that you don't want to do it, you just physically can't. And I can understand like that feeling of just the psychologicalness of, because if you can't get out of bed, you can't be productive, you can't do the everyday activities that you normally do. I mean, that's in and of itself frustrating, and a lot of people don't get that.
And I was still trying to keep up my everyday life. I was still trying to go to work, and I taught fitness on the side, and I would just find myself sleeping for like 14 hours on the weekend because my body couldn't keep up. And I didn't understand why. I was like, oh, I guess I'm just getting up really early, right? But I found myself needing long midday naps. And then I got so fortunate that quarantine happened because things kind of slowed down at my job because we were trying to acclimate working from home and everything. And
Right.
I crashed. I crashed so hard. I was so lucky that I was able to work on my laptop while laying on the couch or laying in bed. It was so much, but I mean, again, fortunate in the fact that I didn't have to quit my job altogether, fortunate in the fact that I was able to come out of it while we were still in this bubble where I still was working from home. So it gave me such leniency to be able to heal myself. But it definitely changed a lot of my relationships, and that I would say for the better, really, because it makes you realize how relationships impact you energetically the same way. Like, so mold wiped me out. I had no energy for anything except for the people that truly like made me happy and lifted me up. And anyone who didn't, unfortunately, sorry, they just didn't end up in my life anymore. Like I didn't have the energy for that.
Yeah,
So
no, it makes sense. Especially some people can be vampires, right? And
yeah.
it's when you have the energy and you probably don't notice it as much. But when you are not feeling well and the world still revolves around that person,
Yeah.
you can really see very quickly how that's not going to be beneficial to you and where you need to go. So that's that. You bring up a good point with the relationships and how that plays a part. And that was a pretty cool topic. Um, so do you remember, you know, and it's okay if you don't, but do you remember when there was what you would consider the worst day, of just, I mean, just the worst day you've ever had to deal with, while going through this, and what was that like?
Yeah, I really do. It was a pretty rough one, but I was living with my boyfriend in full body rash, and could I was taking ridiculous amounts of CBD every night to knock me out because it was itchy, it was irritated, and I needed to sleep. And I didn't even realize it was like 2 hours after I'd fallen asleep. I was like audibly like moaning from discomfort, but like still half asleep, still groggy, just because my body was so itchy and I didn't feel like I could touch it. And my boyfriend wakes me up and he's like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on? Why are you like making noises?" I had no idea. So I'm up from like 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the shower, just showering, just trying to feel any sort of amount of comfort because my body was on fire, like not okay. So I slept for like 2 hours that night. And then I obviously took a sick day at work, and it was the same thing during the day, just on and off sleeping. And it was just such physical discomfort. And then on top of that, without sleeping, brain fog and fatigue were through the roof. And I genuinely remember not knowing if I was going to make it through that day. I was like, at this point, death would be better than this ridiculous amount of discomfort and pain. And it was like someone was just like sticking me with needles all over in these wounds. I didn't know what to do. And I'm just so happy that that was over a year now, and it is beyond me.
Wow. Yeah, and you said something that, always to me, I can rationalize and understand. Death would be better. And first off, I'm really glad that that death was never on the table for you,
Yeah.
and that you're here today. But yeah, I mean, I've talked to people who seriously have considered that, just ending things, due to just the culmination of everything that they're going through physically, mentally, just it can get dark and really difficult,
Yeah. And
and this, and especially because a lot of the time, at this point in time, you don't even really know what's going on, because if you did, you would have already been taking steps to heal. This wouldn't
yeah.
have been the worst day, it would have been a better day, and
Hmm.
so it's really, I think one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I've seen this time and time again, thousands different times with different families. I see that this is very real, right? And
Absolutely.
for me, when I see something like this, and then I make the changes in what I do for work, and I watch these changes actually come over people, and they're actually starting to get better when they improve their environment. When I see everything, the way it correlates, anecdotal or not, for me, it's all I need to know that this is very real. There's too many stories, right, that we encounter, and I know that you encounter them now
Hmm.
in your practice. And so it's really, disheartening, to say the least, that there are so many doctors out there that aren't in tune with air quality and how air quality can impact the holistic health that we have. I mean, we take 20,000 breaths per day. We're consuming more air than water and food, but yet we
Hmm.
never think about air. And so a lot of that has to change, so that we stop the suffering for, honestly, tens of millions of people. This
Yeah.
is a large percentage of the population. This is not a small subset. And I think a lot more needs to be done. And that's why I do what I do. And I have a feeling it's why you do what you do as well. And it's I'm fortunate to be able to talk to people like you who've gone through this, who've come out the other side, and can share their story with others to show them that this does not define you, that
Hmm.
you can get through this. You're a shining example of that.
Yeah.
So no, thank you for being vulnerable, because I know that it's not easy to relive these moments,
Hmm.
and so I really do appreciate everything that you're going through to come through and share your story today. We're gonna get to some better news. We're gonna start talking about the better days. When did you finally start to feel better?
For me, it was probably, I did a total cellular detox because that was what multiple people had recommended to me. They were like, regardless of what's going on in your body, like get all of those cells, clean them out, the mold, if there's metals, whatever the heck. And it was like a month and a half in, I started feeling a lot better. I mean, I was still pretty lethargic, but I had some really good days where I felt energetic. And I also, most of my rashes had decreased in significant amounts. Like they weren't gone yet, but the fact that I could see it physically improving and I could feel my energy improving was amazing. And that's one of the things, it always takes time. So like it took me a month and a half to even start to feel better, but I was just trusting that what I was doing was in the right direction, that I was going to start feeling better. I was going to start seeing it because, like, for example, I run 3-month programs with my clients and I tell them it takes 3 months to heal a lot of things. You have to be patient. That's why I only book people for 3 months. I'm like, I know sometimes it's frustrating. You're like, what the heck? It takes time.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, even like working out and getting in shape, it
Hmm.
doesn't happen in 3 days. It does
Yeah.
take 3 months to start really seeing, the results. But it's that those incremental periods where you feel better, or you start reaching your goals, you
Yeah.
start to notice things. That's what gives you the drive to keep going,
Exactly.
and I love that aspect, and I think it's very intelligent that you do 3 month cycles because it is a journey,
Hmm.
and I tell people that all the time. You can remove mold from your environment, and that's you'll notice something right away because it's no
Hmm.
longer triggering all these other responses. But you're not all. It's not like flipping a light bulb on. You're cured, right?
Yeah.
You have to start detoxifying from the body, and that's going to take
Hmm.
and there is a journey to it. So I think it's really cool that you're just upfront and honest, guys. It's going to take 3 months, okay, but stick with this for 3 months and you
Hmm.
definitely are going to start to feel amazing, which
Absolutely.
is
And like you said, like there are parts along the way where they'll notice they're starting to feel better, but I'm like, we're not going to be out of the woods for a little bit, like you have to know
yeah,
that it's going to take a little bit of time. And same with me, I had to keep telling myself that every single day. I was
yeah,
like, I'm one day closer. Every single day was one day behind me, one day closer to fully healing.
yeah. No, that's awesome. And I'm sure you provide a nice support group for that, for your clients who, after a couple of days they're like, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, couple of days. Like when people are like, okay, well, why do I feel nothing different on this supplement? I'm like, okay, keep going. Just keep
Yeah.
chugging along.
Yeah, just wait. Yeah, it takes time. Yeah, and everything in life takes time to start to see real changes. It's these steps that you take. You can't just all at once drop a bomb and get rid of everything. It's got to be done on a gradient, and that's what takes the time. So I would love to know, what would you recommend to others who may be going through similar challenges that you went through?
I would recommend, honestly, even though I didn't do it, testing to figure it out. I was just fortunate enough that I had colleagues and friends that muscle tested on me. And whether you believe in kinesiology at one or not, if you have enough people tell you the same thing without knowing any background info,
Sure.
for me, that's enough. But I would just say to test. And honestly, I would say to work with a practitioner because every single person is different. What you're going through is different. Maybe it's not just mold, maybe there's other things tied in. And I know that sometimes that seems like out of your reach, but there are people who work with people with a lower like income, more affordable. There are so many options out there. And not, I wouldn't take just the generic advice on those Facebook groups and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. And you mentioned the word holistic before, and I fully and totally believe in a holistic approach to the health
Hmm.
because it's not just one thing.
Hmm.
If you want to truly live your best life, you need to actually look at this from a holistic perspective, right?
Absolutely.
How is the air? How is the food I'm eating? What's the quality of water I'm drinking, right?
Hmm.
Am I getting enough exercise, moving the body, in ways that I'm actually, just keeping the body in shape, all these different things, right? If you just try to solve one problem and you neglect the others, you're never really going to get exactly where you want to go. So it's super
Hmm.
important to look at things holistically. And obviously my expertise is air quality, so
Yeah.
my job is to say, if you want to live your best life, don't forget about air quality because that could be the exact thing that's holding you back. And
Yeah.
and mainly I say that because there's not a lot of people saying that. And
Exactly.
air quality gets lost in the shuffle. And it's like
Hmm.
one of the most important things that impact our bodies that we're not aware of, right? I mean, think about, you can go much longer without food or water than you can without oxygen. And so, we have to make sure what's in the oxygen we're breathing is safe. And
Yeah.
for so many people, unfortunately, it's not. And that's really the big, factor here is we got to be more aware so that we can do something about it.
Totally.
So, all right. So you're now a practitioner. So that's really cool. So tell me about that side of the story. As you started to heal yourself, Obviously you had some sort of passion to move forward. Tell me about that.
After trying to work with people over and over and over, like practitioners and everyone, and not being able to find the answers, I did so much research on my own. I've read so many books. I have taken so many courses to become a practitioner with, honestly, I wasn't even sure if I was going to use it or not. I just really wanted answers for myself. And it ended up me being on the other side of it, realizing that I have so much knowledge that I've just accumulated over the years that it feels like I would be doing a disservice if I didn't help people, if I didn't put it out there. Because I'm sure other people have the same exact information I do too, but the difference is in everyone's experiences and everyone's anecdotes, so I could have learned something the same as someone else, but how I apply it depends on, what I went through. And so I just feel like the more holistic practitioners out there, the better, honestly, because there's so many people who need help, who are dealing with all of these slew of health issues, the mold, the Candida, the gut issues, the heavy metals, all of those things. And people just need someone to tell them, to lead them in the right direction, give them that path, give them the tools, and they can heal themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll never have enough, holistic doctors out there, or
Mm-hmm.
practitioners. You'll never have enough. I mean, you always need people to help guide people in subject matters they are not expert in, right? And
Absolutely.
so totally appreciate that you decided to take these courses and become a practitioner. And I'm sure you are every day learning new things and continuing to adapt and evolve, as am I, in my field. And what's amazing about that is you said it best. When different doctors are going to have different experiences, it's so true, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at trying to help somebody, you don't really know, right? Until you've
Yeah.
helped enough of those people get through and you actually have real evidence that, treatment program A works to
Mm-hmm.
cure, whatever the actual cause is. And that's what I love about this new approach to medicine. I call it new because I'd say it's really become the modern day practice where you're actually fixing the things that causes certain
Yes.
symptoms instead of taking pills to mask symptoms. I love that approach. And I think that's really what, well, first off, it makes a lot of sense, but that's what I believe in, right? You got to fix the problem, the
Mm-hmm.
root cause, not just take stuff and hope for the best. I think that that's really amazing. So how can people come find you?
So I am all over the internet. You can look up my name and you'll find me, but my website is The Rooted in Health, and that's the same as my Instagram. I try to put out a lot of content for what the people want, and a lot of it has to be mold based on my own experiences too.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. And it's really good that you're helping people through mold because I think that there's a lot of functional medicine doctors for sure, but
Hmm.
functional medicine doctors that are also proficient in mold, that have gone through mold themselves,
Hmm.
that can be a beacon for someone who is going through that. Not
Hmm.
only how to deal with some of the, psychological impacts, but also how to actually go through it, deal with the environment, as well as deal with, detoxifying the body. It's super important. So thank you for that. And yeah, so you said you have an Instagram and a website, and they can find you there. Anything
Yeah,
else?
that's just really where you're going to find me. The Rooted in
Okay.
Health, Courtney Otten. You got me.
Okay. And you help people anywhere. It doesn't matter where they are.
Yeah, I do all virtual consults. I don't live in the most progressive space anyways. I'm not sure as many people would want to see me in person.
Got it. Okay, cool. So that's awesome. So they can find you online, they can do a virtual consult with you, and then obviously you help get whatever testing they need done to kind of
Yeah.
verify and validate what's going on with them. Awesome. Well, that's
Yeah.
great. Awesome. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else you wanted to share with anybody who may be listening who is going to find this whole podcast helpful?
I just want them to keep going. Never think that this is just how your life has to be. Keep going, keep searching for answers. Don't stop, even when you keep getting a bunch of no's. Because I was talking to someone recently who was like, I guess this is how life has to be. It does not, it can be better, and you can heal.